There are only 5 books. I've been drawing it for more than 12 years. So there's a lot of work that goes into drawing mangas. And I don't know if you guys are interested in creating some for yourself. Maybe for fun, maybe for a profession. But because there's so much that goes into it, I think it would be helpful if you know what kind of problems lie ahead, so that you know it's actually normal to struggle a lot to get something made and not feel like, man, I don't have talent or I don't know any of this, and then just give up and think you can't do it. So, any of you here have characters that you create or little stories that you make for things that you like, or OCs for TV series that you like? No? Yeah? So you do what all of us do in the beginning. You just, when you're drawing, you want to draw your own stuff, right? You want to draw your own characters. So you pick that up yourself, and then eventually you think, maybe this character has a story. So you think of a story for her or him, and then you like the story a lot, so you want to create something out of that story. But then that's when you stop, because suddenly all these problems come into play. You don't know how to draw paneling, you don't know how big the pages are, you don't know how to publish it afterwards. You just feel like there's a lot to deal with, but there's so few information for you. So because I've done all of this myself over a long time, I can tell you what kind of all the experience that I have made, maybe make it easier for you when you actually come across that problem. Okay, so next slide, please. So this is probably you if you have, this is probably you if you just start drawing manga yourself.
Yeah, we thought it was closed.
Oh.
We thought it didn't start yet.
Oh, okay. Well, we just started, so you didn't miss out. I'll let everybody sit down. Okay, so for everyone who just came in, I'll reintroduce myself. I am Shilin. I am a manga artist. I draw my own comic books. You can see them here. It's called Persona, and there are 5 books out right now. So I draw manga for a living, and this workshop is about how you can make your own manga if you would like. And I would like to share my experience in creating this story, since I've been working on it for many years. So we're at the part where I was talking about how you might feel like once you get to the point where you feel like you want to draw a manga, suddenly there's a lot of problems that you come into that you don't really know how to deal with. Maybe a lot of you guys draw art, just individual pieces of art. But when it comes to manga, how do you draw from panel to panel, all those kind of things? I have dealt with for over 10 years in working on my comic here. So maybe if I can share my experience, you wouldn't feel so stuck when you get to that point. Okay, next slide, please. So first I'm going to talk about writing the story. So writing is a very important part of drawing a manga. People think a lot about the drawing part, but actually without the writing, you're just drawing things that don't make sense, they don't flow, and probably not a very good story, and a poor story make you not want to read the manga or the comic. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the writing. Now, everyone writes in a different way. What works for you might not work for me. So it's important for you to know everything I'm about to tell you today. If it doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. Don't feel like you have to do it my way. But there are generally 2 ways to write a story. The first way is you plan everything out, right? You plan out things logically. You have a plot, and then you try to deduce what the ending, you try to deduce from the ending back to the beginning, so that you have a reason for everything that you do. Or you can not do any of that, which is the second way, you just write whatever you want. That sounds not so professional, but it's actually true that you could do that and still write a very good story, and you probably enjoy it a lot better than the first way. So next slide, please. Okay, so here's the, I wish I could see it myself. Here's the first glimpse of how I do it personally. You don't have to do this. Actually, maybe it'll help if I open my slides here on my phone. Okay. So first, I sometimes come up with little scenes. You probably do too. Maybe if you have two characters, you think of a way that they talk to each other, or like one guy tricked the other and they like have a fun time. You think of these little scenes, but they might not have a story context. But that doesn't matter. I write it down, and then I have like a couple of scenes here, as you can see on the slide. And then once I have enough scenes, I put them together in order. Some of the scenes, they don't make sense in the story context, so I throw it out. And I will have a summary of sort of like a little story that I want to tell. Then based on that summary, I write a script, so dialogue. So that's number 3. You would see a conversation between Ray and the king. And then lastly, once I have the dialogue, I draw storyboard. So storyboard is very quick, really sketchy thumbnails for what the entire page looks like. And then eventually I base the final page, which you see at the bottom right corner. That's a page from my book. And I base that page on the story thumbnail, so that when I draw the page, I only need to think about how good I can make the page look. Not need to think about, okay, how to write this dialogue, how to do everything else. And the next slide, please. So my example is, again, very just for me. If it's not, if it's something that feels unnatural to you, don't do it. It's not the logical planning, which I have up here. So there are some benefits and drawbacks, of course, to different ways of writing. If you plan everything out logically, you won't have to worry about, say, something makes no sense. So on the left side, I have a character who makes sense. She says, I work really hard because when I was young, I was having a hard time. And now I'm strong because I was working through the hard time. So not only do you know that she's strong, but you also know why. And then the second character, she's like, I'm so powerful and so beautiful, but you don't know why. I just am like that. And when you make a simple character without a story, the second thing tends to happen. So when you plan the story backwards, you create the character for the situation, then that character already has meaning and has purpose. And when a reader reads it, they are more likely to believe that character. And then sometimes you see in mangas like Bleach or Naruto, they have hundreds of different subplots. Like the main plot is whatever, eating the bad guy, but then suddenly there's a romance subplot, and then they talk about that for a while, and then they would go back to beating the bad guy. If you plan everything out logically, you have that organization. You wouldn't lose track of your story. You wouldn't end the story, and then readers would be like, wait, what happened to these two people? Nobody explained what happened to them. Did they die? Are they still alive? So you don't have that problem. But one downside of writing logically like this, everything is created because of logic reason. It's really boring. It's really boring for you to write because it's just like doing chores, next question, answer it, next question, answer it. And it's also really predictable. Like the little guy here says, I need a romance plot, so these two characters are going to be together, even if they don't fit each other. You would feel like, as a reader, that's really robotic, it makes no sense. So when you write logically, you might have to watch out for those problems. Next slide, please. But when you write naturally, you won't have those problems. You'll have the opposite. So the benefit of writing naturally is you go along with what you want to think about. You make a character, and then you ask yourself, as if you are making a friend with the character, who is she? Where is she from? Is the place she's from nice? Do people there treat her well? Or why don't they treat her well? What does that make her? Does it make her really sad? Make her really angry? And if she grows up angry, does she turn into a really mean person? So you think about that, and as you go along, your story grows on its own. It creates a plot for its own because you have your own focus on the movement of like that thought, and it feels organic and it feels natural for the story to go that way. But what this requires is something that all of you will think a lot about, and that's inspiration, right? If you have art block, you don't know what to draw. I have no inspiration today. Everything I draw is crap. You need inspiration for a naturally growing story. So that means if you have no inspiration that day, you're not working. You're not writing anything. Nothing will be done, and you don't know how to move a plot along. You will get stuck at a point. You will have writer's block. You will have artist's block. And if you work for a publisher, you have a deadline. You can't do that. You will be at like 2 a.m. and you're like, my project is due in 8 hours. I don't know what to do for this story because I don't know what makes sense. So it's actually good to have a combination of both because of these two methods, but it is also natural for you to not want to do it one of these ways. So for me, I rarely ever build a story logically. When I do that, I'm really sad, and then the story turns out like crap. I don't like it. I draw it halfway, I throw it all out. So it's, in the end, really important for you to do it and see if it works for you. Next slide, please. So I talked about the writing technique, but I didn't talk about where writing comes from. And for most people, you think inspiration, like I said, but also experience is very crucial for writing. Because when you write, even if you don't think that you are writing your life experience, some part of it goes into it. If your experience is with a lot of people who bullied you when you were little, you're probably going to write something that has an aspect of someone bullying someone else, and then that person, how they deal with it, who protects them, how do they persevere through it. So because you have that experience, you understand it, and so it allows you to write it in a way that's believable to the readers. And that goes both ways. It goes with the things that you agree with, and then there's things that you don't agree with. There are people that you think are really stupid, people who you think are really mean, and you don't understand why they do those things. You don't understand why it's like all they want to do is cause trouble for other people. You think that's all there is to it, but you don't understand their mind. So what happens is, if you write an evil character who is like that evil character will be just evil for no reason. And the readers will be like, well, they just wrote this character to be evil because the hero needs someone to defeat. But if you think about some of the main movies, like people who have lost their loved one, they lost their wife, and they want to resurrect their wife, and they do anything it takes, even if it destroys the world, they want to do that for their wife. And suddenly, well, okay, even if you don't agree with that method, you at least see the reason behind it. So it's really important for you to be able to see through the eyes of everyone that you create. And that knowledge comes from you talking to a lot of people in real life, talking to all the people that you don't agree with. The more they don't agree with you, the more you learn from them, because the more you don't understand that comes from them. Okay, next slide, please. Alright, so now you have a hypothetical story, so it's time for you to draw the manga. But you realize that there's way too many things you need to worry about when drawing a manga. You have to know how to do panel layouts, draw characters, draw backgrounds, draw machines, plants, stuff you never draw in your one-off illustrations. Like for this illustration here, I don't have to draw any background if I don't want to. If I feel like it's empty, I just make the character bigger so that I don't have to draw any background. And then you have to worry about pacing, how the story moves, and all of that might not come from just drawing illustrations alone. So there's a lot of things that you suddenly have to learn how to do. And this is where a lot of people struggle or they stop because they don't know where to start. They feel like, I can't do this anyway. There's too much. There's no way I can learn all of these. Even if I spend 1 year on anatomy, I still have to spend the next 15 years on learning the rest of the stuff. Next slide, please. But what you don't realize is that all of those are equal parts in a little structure that you built, a little machine that you built that is your comic. And just like movies and operas and TV shows, all of this go into it. And it is not impossible because at one point, everyone who's ever made a comic or a movie or a TV show, they don't know how to do any of this. They also start at the place that you start. It's just that they went to do it one by one. And so each time they get to focus on one thing, they don't try to do everything all at once. And because of that, they are able to master it altogether and eventually be able to build the castle that is your comic. And the most important part is, of course, in a house, it's the foundation. It's at the ground. If the foundation is unstable, you can have a palace and it will fall down. So the basics are the most important. Next, please. So here I've listed 3 basics that are the most important, I think, in my opinion, for manga and comics drawing. And that is anatomy, perspective, and composition. If you are able to master all 3 of these foundations, then you can draw anything you like. You can draw a sci-fi comic, you can draw a fantasy comic, you can draw a slice of life. You will not have any trouble with the actual drawing part. Because great basics make you a great artist, and as long as you understand the fundamentals, you can build up everything else, everything that makes sense to you. So next slide, please. Okay. I think one of my pages is out of order. Okay, here it is. So with anatomy, it's obvious, right? What do you draw the most? The characters. Even if you were just drawing little one-off drawings, you're still drawing a ton of characters. And not only that, your characters are the actors. Who's the most paid people on a blockbuster movie? It's the actors. They get millions of dollars because they can pretend to be someone else and convey to you how they feel, tell you the story. And only the best actors can do that. And unfortunately, you have to be that best actor. You have to know exactly what is it that they do that make them so believable. And so once you learn that, you will be forced to draw it with anatomical understanding. So if you think someone who is smiling, it's not just a smile. Sometimes it's a fake smile. Sometimes it's a real smile. Sometimes it's an evil smile. And then sometimes it's a really just happy, positive, there's nothing to it, smile. But what makes it different? You don't know it. If you are drawing just from manga alone, you would think, okay, evil smile has more line on top, and then a regular smile is like this. It's really hard for you to figure it out. But if you know the physics, not physics, if you know the anatomy that goes into the face, and you notice it from other people, if you look at how someone who is truly happy they smile, you notice that they don't only move their mouth, they move their entire face. They move up their eyebrows, their eyes are open, larger. If you understand anatomy, you can know all of that and be able to make your characters the best actors without having to pay them like $30 million. And the second thing is perspective, which is natural because next to the characters, you need background. So I have 2 pages here. They are also from my book. One has no background, and then one has some buildings in the back. And these buildings are really simple. They don't really have much perspective to them. But the left side, you have no idea what's going on because you don't know where they are. It's just fog. Are they in a studio? But the second one, since you know that it's outside and it's in an open area, maybe on top of that, you can even think, okay, there's enough area around each character for that guy to maybe do some major damage if he's a bad guy. Maybe he can blow up the whole place and he would not harm himself. So not only does it set the scene for where your story is taking place, but it also gives the reader possibility to guess where things might be going. And then you can counter that guess by surprising them with something else. So there's a lot you can do with backgrounds. But you can't do any of this because if you don't understand perspective, which is vanishing point. The left side, there's a house that is correctly drawn because all the lines align with the vanishing point. And then there's a house on the right side that looks more like a kid's drawing because it doesn't have any of the correct lines. The line is just a doodle of a house. So next slide, please. So in order to learn both of them, the best way is to Google tutorials. So I'm not actually going to teach you anything here, like anything technical, because you can find that yourself anywhere. And that is the most important thing you can learn. If you feel like you must be taught by people how to draw or how to find answers to your questions, you will not be able to go very far. But if you know that you can find an answer for everything that you can ever come up with, and you can, there's millions of tutorials on Google. You just have to spend like at most half an hour and you will definitely find the answer that you want. You will be able to teach yourself to a professional level without having to pay for school or pay for a teacher. And you will never feel stuck because anything that comes up, you will be able to find a solution for it. So the best first step is find tutorials on Google or on DeviantArt, on Tumblr. People like to make tutorials and show how they work themselves personally, and you can learn a lot from those. After a tutorial, to show you like where muscles are, where skeletons are, it's really important to learn realism. So you draw not in manga style, but in realism, because a style is not the basics. The style is like makeup or clothing on a person, but it's not the actual structure of the person. If you know the structure of the person, you can change it to any style. So that is an important distinction to make, and that's why it's so important to look up photos or draw people in real life. You notice some artists, they go to cafes, they just sit there and draw people. Why don't they just go home and then imagine it? Because you can't imagine it if it's not in here in the first place. And to get it in here, you have to go out there to look at people. So it's very important to do that. I have some hands drawn here. I actually took photos of my own hands. I drew lines on the hands so that I know where the skeletons are. And then I took photos of them. I drew studies of them. And then at the bottom right corner, there's a page from my comic, which I also show some stock photos for, so that I can get a feel on when she moves, how she moves her body, not just her hand, but her head, her hip, how they all flow together in a way that is believable. Next slide, please. And then for perspective, same thing, Google, read the theory, And then you can practice by drawing your own room, because everything is in perspective, but there's lots of things in your room. There's a desk, there's chairs, there's books on the floor, there's a bed, stuff on the ceiling. And that is very good for practicing perspective, because you have to be able to see where the vanishing points are based on what's real. And real is never wrong, right? The only thing that you don't want to do is to draw things wrong. And if you imagine things, there's always something that goes wrong, because you don't take into account everything that you see. So draw your house, draw your room, maybe go outside, draw the city that's far in the background. But that allows you to have practice and be able to draw and see in perspective. Next slide, please. Okay, so here comes the slightly hard part. It's called composition. Some of you probably already know what it's all about, but most of the time it's not mentioned in art tutorials, because tutorials, they teach you really technical things, how to draw things that look like other things. But composition is how everything in a picture comes together. And that's important because not only in each panel of the manga you have an individual picture by itself, and then you also have to put all the panels together in a way that doesn't look confusing. So both of those elements can be considered composition. Composition is the placement and arrangement of visual elements in a work of art. So in comics, it has panel placements, camera angles, where you put the speech bubbles, all composition. If you ever want to think about how do I put speech bubbles, or know where to put speech bubbles, or how do I decide what camera angle to use for each panel, the word you're looking for is composition. So I have 3 examples here. On the first one, it shows how composition shows you direction. So maybe when you are reading comics, manga, as a reader, you don't notice these things, but they influence you. So on the top left corner, it reads right to left. On the top left corner, the bubbles go straight to the character's face. And then the character is looking at the next panel, so you follow their eyes and you look at, okay, what is she looking at? And then if you notice the black-haired girl, she looks down, she looks up, and then she looks the other way. So you're like, okay, where is she looking at? You don't think that consciously, but subconsciously it helps you navigate through this page that has not so conventional panel layout. And in this sense, it helps a lot, because imagine if you took the bottom left corner panel and you flip it around. Everything will be broken, but you don't know why. So that is one important effect of composition. The second one is focus, which is really simple, because the bigger the panel is, the more you look at it. The smaller it is, you spend less time there. And then this leads to the third one, which is time and motion. In a comic, it's a really special case, because you don't get to decide how long a viewer looks at each panel. And so if they are staring at a fight sequence, and in the middle of the fights, they look at something for a long time, that will disrupt their reading experience, and they have a wrong sense of time. In movies, in TV shows, they control the time because it actually flows, but readers get to choose how long they spend on each panel. But you can still control how long they spend on each panel by showing focus. So shorter, smaller panels like 1, 2, and 3, all drawn in the same way, just hand. So you think of it in a sense of how is that hand moving, because of the way I chose to use composition, use camera angle to tell you where to look at. And then eventually your eyes stop at the biggest panel, down where he forms his big staff, because it takes up half the page, so you look at it for a long time. So you can use panels to control how readers read your comic. So next page, please. And then we don't really think about composition, so you really have to try really hard to think about it first. So it's not so much about drawing practice, but thinking practice. So again, Google tutorials about composition, it will tell you a lot. Maybe I can't even tell you all about composition in like 2 hours. So it takes a long time to understand, but once you understand, try to identify it in other people's paintings, in other photos. So I have some examples down below. You can take famous paintings and you can put a grid on it, or you can look at where people are looking at. You can take a look at the light around the woman who is raising the flag. That light frames the woman, for example. So you can notice a lot of these things, and then you know how other people do it, and then you can do it in your own page in number 3 here, which is like the left side with a big X on it, because the 2 characters are so far down that you don't even notice that they're there. So on the second page, I raised them up, and now they're at the other focal points of the composition, and you would read the speech bubble and actually look at them. So those are things that you can apply to your work after you understand other people's work better. Next slide, please. And then lastly, a lot of people ask me about paneling. How do you make interesting panels? Some people think that interesting means complex, right? More things to look at, more interesting. But that's not actually the case, because your story is in the panel itself. So just that one frame. Your story is not the entire frame together. So you don't want people to be like, oh, what am I looking at? I have on the left example of each page. It's really simple, it only has 5 panels, and the big one on Urahara, and you know what to look at, obviously, the first one, because it's huge, it only has his face on it, and everything else frames the really important things that he says. I don't know what he says. And then, in comparison to the second example, which is not good, I drew it in like 1 minute, but it's also not good because it has too many panels on it. First of all, you want people to think about your story. You don't want them to try to figure out what you're trying to say. So there's way too many panels, you don't know what order to read them at. But also because the panels are so small, you are probably not going to be able to draw much in them. So each panels by themselves, they are very weak because you didn't give them enough space. And I put the third one there, which is a Sailor Moon Crystal opening storyboard. And I put that there because even though it's not manga, it's actually important to show how important it is to draw each panel properly rather than having interesting panel layout. Because in movie storyboards, all of it is just the same rectangle square. But even though it's just 2 giant columns of the same size rectangle squares, you can tell exactly what's going on. You know the movements. You can almost watch the movie in your head because the content of the panel is important. So my advice is always focus more on the content of the panels. And then if you want to use panels to help yourself, there's just one rule to follow. Use a big panel for an important important moment in the manga, and then you don't really have to worry about trying to make things interesting, use not rectangles and stuff like that. Next slide, please. And lastly, you can always learn to draw without actually drawing. So there are some times when I don't paint for 3 months and I come back and I paint better because during that 3 months, I'm not brain dead, I'm still alive. So when I'm outside, it's normal for people to say, oh yeah, okay, the sunset looks nice, and then they take a picture and they leave. But as an artist, you should ask yourself, why does it look nice? What color is it? Why is it that color in order? What is the sunlight doing to the atmosphere to change it to that gradient? And once you understand, once you think about stuff like this, you have a question. And once you have a question, you have Google, you have an answer. So the most important part is for you to remember to ask those questions, whatever you see. Like maybe you can see me right now and you're like, why does the light make her, how does the light make her face stand out from, say, her neck? because maybe this is a shadow I can't actually see. But if you think of that more often enough, when you draw, it's going to be something that comes naturally to you. So you will be able to draw better, even if you didn't have the practice. You will know what to put where. And all of that comes from real life or hobbies. Reading comics, watching movies helps you tell stories better. And then looking at beautiful things, you will remember more, and then you will draw more. And knowing stories of yourself, knowing stories of your parents, your friends, some homeless guy you met on the streets, they will all help you in writing a story better, even though you're not actually working on anything. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that you have a manga all done after, like, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, you would think, maybe I can share it with people. And the one really common thing these days, you're lucky, you live in an age where you can just share things and people will find it. Imagine you're in 1980s and you draw a manga and you're like, I want to show my friends, so you show your 2 friends, and then that's it, because you can't show anyone else. So these days you can post it on Tapastic, you can post it on Line, Webtoons, even on Twitter, Tumblr. People will be able to follow tags, follow you, and they will be able to see updates. So you can share your comics that way. And one important thing to remember is you want people to keep coming back, right? So you want them to remember you. And how do you do that? You set a schedule. If you imagine yourself as, say, a reader of my comic, and I update today, and then I update once 3 days from now, and then I forget to update for like a month because I don't know, I went to do something else, you probably won't come back because there's nothing new. Even though you know I'm not dead, I will probably eventually come back, but you won't remember because there's other comics out there that you can read. You don't have to stick around for mine. So it's really important to set a schedule. If it's once a week, follow that once a week. And if you're sick, post about it. I used to always get so upset when my favorite comics don't update, but I noticed that one thing is, if they just say, hey guys, I'm sick this week, the update will be next week. That's enough. So I come back, I see the notice, I leave, I come back next week. But if I go there, there's nothing there, and I was like, they probably forgot about it, they don't care about us, I'm not going to come back anymore. So you don't want your readers to do that, because eventually your new readers will be here for a while, they would leave, and then there's new readers, so there's no growth. There's no followers accumulating, they just come and leave. So it's important to have schedule, and if you can't keep a schedule, draw a notice or draw something cute to show them, and they'll be like, oh, that's cute, and they'll come back next week. Next slide, please. And the next step is, of course, if you have put so much work into a manga, and a manga takes a lot of work, you would think, can I make some money off of it? Because if you can keep drawing the manga. And if you can make a lot of money, if you have a lot of readers that really love your work, they can help you keep doing this for longer times during the day, and then eventually you become a professional. That's exactly what happens to anybody who tries to do anything. You do it more, people who like your work or need your work support you, and then you get to keep doing it. So there's that option for your comic, and there are 2 choices these days. It used to be just one, which is publishing with a publishing company. So publishing company is Paramount here. They published the German version of my comic. And there are some good and bad sides to publishing companies, because I heard the publishing companies in Europe are actually really good, which is nice to hear, because in North America it's actually absolutely crap. Nobody makes any money from it. People don't really like drawing stories, and all the publishing companies, they just collapse. Like Tokyo Pop was the only one for a long time, and then they closed like 10 years ago. So there's no Tokyo Pop there anymore, just because they lose money. There's not enough people buying the books. They like to read it online. But I heard it's really good here, so my opinion is biased. Just if I say something bad, maybe don't take it seriously. It might not be the same case here. But usually, it's the common thing that people go for. So you ask someone, hey, do you want to be a mangaka when you're grown up? And they're like, yeah, I want to be published, right? You want to be published by a company and not yourself. But it's actually really hard to find a publisher that cares about your work, not just a publisher that will take your work. Because what they do is they sell content. You are just content. They are a business. Some of them don't actually care about your story. If your story doesn't make them money, they will not work for your story. They will print it and then they will put it on the side. And then nobody will read your story, nobody will find it, and eventually it will die. And you don't actually get to be able to do anything about it because the publisher owns your work. And sometimes if you sign a bad contract and they decide to say, I drew 5 books and then I published 1 book, they don't like it, they publish it, it doesn't sell well, they will be like, okay, we're not publishing this anymore. But we own the rights to the title, so you can't publish it yourself either. It'll just sit here and rot. So that's one downside to publishers. And it's also because you have to split the profits with publishers. So they are a business, they need to make money. So let's say you get a royalty of like 15%, which is already pretty good. If you sell a book for $10, you only get $1.50. So you have to sell like 10,000 books to make $10,000 to live for a year. And if your books don't sell that much, you have to go out and find a part-time job. So, and 10,000 books is a lot to me. So there's also that. But there are some good sides to having a publisher. Because again, they are a business, their strong point is not drawing, it's not writing, but it's marketing. It's something that you can't do. They help you do it, and in return, you both benefit from your work. So they can sell your books, they have connections with bookstores, they can sell in much larger volumes, and you don't need to worry about any of that. I do all of that myself, and I can tell you it takes a long time. For me to even find out how to draw a book, how to print a book, it took me half a year of working every day just to find a printer or realize or learn and understand how to print a book. And in that half a year, maybe I could have drawn another comic, who knows. So it takes a long time, and that's something off your shoulders. The publisher will take care of it. And if you have a publisher, you also have stability, so you know you will be paid. Sales will keep coming in. You don't have to worry about what happens next year. Will I be published for a year and then I'll have no money anymore because it's all gone. So you don't have to worry about that. Next slide, please. So the other option is self-publishing. Maybe some of you know this, but maybe not. I'll explain. Self-publishing means you print the book yourself. You find a printer, which is not the same as a publisher. A printer prints anything you want. You give them your homework, they print 10,000 copies, it's fine. And then you sell your own books. Maybe on Amazon, on your own store, at anime conventions. You see a lot of people doing that here. And you get all the money for yourself. You don't have to deal with any publisher, any rights, licensing, stuff like that. And the one big benefit of that is if you're not working with a publisher, you probably can upload your comic for free online and still sell the books. So you will not have to be stuck with selling books. If someone wants to read your story and see if they like it first, they can. And that means it opens up a lot of viewership, because let's say I tell all of you that you can read my story, but only if you pay me $10. You probably won't buy it because what if the story is bad? I just wasted $10, right? But if I tell you you can read it online, then you will probably go there, see it. If you don't like it, you stop reading. No loss. It's free. But because of that, there's many more readers that will read my story, and much higher chance that someone who likes the story will find my story. And that's the most important part. You don't want to write a story to make other people happy. You want people who love the things that you do to find you. Because maybe some of you really love Bleach, and I hate it, but I don't matter because you guys like it and you buy the books and the author can keep going. So it's not none of his business to change his story until it's written in a way that I like it. And then there's also the benefits of flexible timeline, because you publish it yourself. You don't have to worry about deadlines. Maybe you feel like I need 3 more months to make this chapter good. You can do that because you don't have flyers out there saying like, Personal, I'm releasing in May, and then in May it's not here. And you probably make people really angry. But in order to self-publish, you need a lot of discipline. So most people are used to, say, the boss telling you what to do, and you say, man, I have to do it by tomorrow. Okay, I'll do it. But what if you don't have to do it by tomorrow? Maybe you will never finish the book because you feel like, I'm in a lot of pain today, I won't draw, and then tomorrow, I have to do a lot of chores, I'm not going to work on this. If you don't have self-discipline, you won't be able to finish work, and you will be stuck in the cycle of producing content, losing viewers because you don't update fast enough, and then not being able to grow out of it. So you actually need a lot of discipline to do this, and it's not for everyone. And then also self-publishing, like I said, takes a lot of knowledge in things that have nothing to do with art. Like, it takes me 3 hours to pack like maybe 10 orders of books from my store, and I would rather use that 3 hours to draw something else, and my viewers will probably want that 3 hours, want that new drawing instead of me just sitting here packing books, doing something that someone else can already do. So it's really time-consuming and takes away from the time that you already need to create a manga, which is like mountains of work already, like I said. Okay. But if you make it, you will be able to do this for a living, and you are all very lucky to be living in this day and age, because maybe 10, 20 years ago, you can't do that on your own. There's no way for you to find enough money to pay for 1,000 copies of books to be printed. It's really hard for you to find a publisher, a printer, that is willing to just print 1,000 copies instead of like 1 million copies for a big-time company. And then right now, because there's Kickstarter, there's Patreon, each fan only have to pay a little bit to help you all come up with enough money to invest in that first book that will sell for the profit that you need in order to make a living, so that you can keep making more, so that you can keep selling more, and then you have more money to keep the series going. So that's very fortunate that you guys can do that. Next slide, please. So that was all of the presentation. Seems like a lot of work, but it's not impossible to do, because all of us have to start from zero. Don't be mistaken that some people might be talented. You think they don't have to work as hard. Chances are they work much, much harder than you, and they don't talk about it because they think it's enjoyable. The most important thing for you to remember is just work. Just work on anything. If you want to draw characters, just draw a lot of characters. Study a lot. Do a lot of studies of real-life characters. Don't worry about the background if it's not your cup of tea. Maybe eventually, once you get comfortable with characters and you actually want to expand, you can expand and move on to other topics. That's how I slowly learned over like 20 years of drawing for fun. And it's definitely not just all learned in one go. And yeah, like I said, everyone starts out bad, so as long as you keep working, you will get there. You have the resources to get there. What you don't want to do is not have fun, because what happens when you don't have fun? You stop doing something. If you play a game and you keep losing, you're going to quit that game. So if you think you're bad, and then you believe that you must be good in order to do anything well, you think you have to be talented to do anything well, you won't want to draw anything. And then because you don't draw, you have no practice. And you have no practice, you become worse. And that cycle continues. Eventually, you just don't want to draw anymore. But if you think you're back and you're like, okay, I'm going to spend a lot of time working on this, I know I can get better. You get the practice in. Even if people laugh at you now, you have the practice to get better. And when you get better, you can notice the difference. You see the results and you're like, oh man, my practice, my time is actually paying off. I should keep going. You want to keep going. And also when you improve, you have fun. And when you have fun, you want to keep doing something. And that's what you want to do to train yourself into wanting to work hard. It's not about, I must struggle through all this hardship. I hate myself, but I need to do this for practice. It's not about that. It's much more about you having fun. Do it for your enjoyment. And everything else comes naturally, because if you enjoy it, you want to keep going, you want to get better, you ask yourself many questions. And you grow as an artist much better that way. And yeah, so as long as you work hard, know that you can find answers online, and you can teach yourself anything, and you can learn from everything around you, and you're willing to put in the time, I can say any of you can try to draw a comic or a manga on your own and make a story on your own, even if it's not for a living, even if it's just for fun. You can learn, any of you can learn to do this without the need of, say, practicing really hard, without the need of going to school or struggling with motivation and stuff like that. And it will be a very enjoyable experience. So thank you for watching. Hope it was helpful for you. I think we're out of time, right? So we have to go now. But I will be at the viewers hall on the second floor. If you have any questions, feel free to come by and ask me. I'd love to talk to you because I have nothing to do there. So come visit me, and thank you again for watching.